All right, we're here. We're recording now. Everybody, welcome to my third episode of Gumshoe Studios. Very excited. Again, this is very raw, and so some of you may or may not know. My goal is to interview people who live a life of service, who provide some kind of service to the world. Find out who they are, what they do, why they do what they do, and I've assigned them a movie, an old movie, because I love old movies. This particular film that we're going to review today isn't film noir per se, but I thought it was very appropriate for my guest. And so, without further ado, I like to introduce Greg or Gregorio Martinez. And Greg, can introduce yourself and what do you do for a living, bud? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, thanks, Louis, for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure knowing you for a long time. I am Gregorio Martinez, but a lot of everybody calls me Greg for short. I am the deputy director for the mayor's office of community safety.
And full disclosure, I've known Greg now for, man, I think it's going on with 10, 12 years. I'm not sure how long we've known each other.
Yeah.
And we've both grown within this field of nonprofit. I mean, he's gone on to work for the city, which I'm very proud of. I'm so proud of the work that he's done. Back in the day, we would set up basketball courts for young people, and through his organization, the organization I worked for before. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, originally, I was born in Mexico City, Mexico. A few years back, won't say how many years back, but yeah, originally from Mexico City. My family then immigrated to the United States, specifically in the Quad City area. So I grew up on the Illinois side of the Quad Cities. It's made up of four cities, two on the Iowa side, two on the Illinois side, and I grew up on East Moline, Illinois. And then eventually I ended up where I currently am, which is Chicago, Illinois.
But the journey was pretty amazing, right? And then, so what brought? So had you always been interested in politics? I guess city hall. What would that kind of work be? What would you call the work that you do? I mean, because I know you were in the nonprofit sector for a good minute, but then you entered this kind of work. How would you describe this kind of work? I'm not sure what the word is. Um,
Yeah, I mean, just I guess kind of how I guess it is a question I do get pretty often is how did I end up in a position like working in a mayor's office for a pretty large city, and so as you said, you kind of alluded to it right before this is that journey is never a straight path really for anybody, and it's part of how I got to the place I am, but also kind of what the theme of what we're talking about, which is just how do we get here to this life of service, right, or giving back. And so yeah, through my journey, that really began, as I mentioned earlier, as a young person, going through that immigrant experience really taught me a lot about, really gave me a unique perspective in that, it often takes a lot of hard work, to get ahead. But oftentimes too as well, right? Things are not always as equitable as they could be, especially again coming through that immigrant experience. And so that really shaped me and wanting, really wanting to give back to folks, so people wouldn't go through the same experience that, or some of the hardships that I went through, my family went through when I was younger. Although my parents were incredibly supportive, they were really supportive and also incredibly hardworking. So that was definitely a benefit. But all that to say is that's really what kind of shaped that vision of wanting to give back and being of service. And eventually, I became a teacher, secondary education. So for people that don't know, that means I could teach social studies from sixth grade, between sixth and 12th grade. And I ended up, finishing college and getting my teaching certificate around 2008 when there was a housing crash and there was a lot of economic turmoil. Unemployment was very high. It was just a very rough economy. So there was very few employment opportunities to become a teacher in Chicago public schools, which is what I wanted to do, which ended up, you know, with me looking at other avenues besides just that formal public education position that I always sought. And with that, I applied to different positions, and I found a position teaching high school credit recovery in a youth development program that focused specifically on young people that had gone through the criminal justice system. And you know, I fortunately got hired, and within a week of being there, in this not-for-profit, working directly with those young people, I was like, this is where I need to be. This is even better than teaching. This is, you know, again, this is, it just felt like the right fit for me. And so that started my journey in working in violence prevention and community safety and youth development and community development. And I did that working in many different capacities, from, you know, just working directly with young people, doing direct service, to managing programs, to then developing youth violence prevention programs, which is, you know, in the space that we can get into. And then from that parlayed into a position with Cook County government, working in the youth workforce development space, applying, you know, all the lessons that I had learned in that not-for-profit space, in developing tailored programs for young people, you know, who are most highly impacted by violence. And from there, ended up here in the current position that I'm at, which I've been for about almost 4 years, working
That
in
was my
city
next question.
government.
How long have you been working in the Marys? So about 4 years. Now, see, we're talking about this, right? And it's a sort of a snapshot, but the journey to get there was, I'm sure, filled with a lot of like ups and downs, because you know, you're right. You know, none of our paths. I don't think anyone wakes up one day and says, "Oh, I'm going to work for a nonprofit." I'm gonna, you know, this. I just like you. I went to art school and I fell into it, and then I think I like what you said. Like the second you started working, not the second, but the time you started working there was like a aha moment for me. It was at the Boys and Girls Club, and I will say this, you know, throughout all these podcasts, that the Boys and Girls Club really changed the trajectory of my life. Just
Sure.
working with, and it was about that age group, the fifth to like eighth grade, freshmen in high school, kind of helping to like take that journey with them and through that adolescence part, you know, was that. What was your aha moment? Like you said, but what was that one moment in time? If you can recall, was it that one kid that you helped, or this moment where things were like, well, this is where you said it, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, I'm smiling because there's anybody who's done this type of work has, you know, has experienced or gone through, like, you know, a lot of unique things that most people don't, and they always bring a smile to your face, either for good or because it's just such you know, like an impactful memory. But I think when you said about what was that aha moment, um, again, there's so many, but I would say the first one and I said the first week, right? I was like, I think I knew I knew I'm in the right place. Um, this kid, and you know, I just graduated college, so I was very young. I was like, you know, still like, I was like 23 or 24, you know, at the oldest. And, you know, I was very close to the age of the young people we work with. The program served 16 to 24-year-olds. So there were people that were in the program that were my age, right? So a little unique, a little weird of a dynamic right there. So this one young man, again, first week in the job, it's before class. So a lot of like the participants in the program, you know, it was not a typical you know, schedule. So they were kind of trickle in sometime between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. And so some just got there a lot earlier. And one of the, this is a little bit more of a lighter story, but, you know, I'll just say one of the more somber things about this is, you know, the ones that came a lot earlier were the ones that just had a lot more issues at home, or honestly were up to, you know, utilizing public transportation overnight as housing. So they would just get there very early. So this is one of those young men who just had a very turbulent home life. And, you know, he would get there relatively early every day. And again, this was like my first or second day on the job. And he asked me for 50 cents. And I said, sure. I was like, oh, this young man just needs 50 cents. He's probably looking for something to eat or whatever. Um, Again, always having that kind of giving heart, right? And so I said, sure. And then one of my coworkers saw this interaction, pulled me aside, somebody, a more seasoned coworker, and said, hey, don't give him or really any of the any of the participants like 50 cents, because he just go to the gas station next door to in the in the strip mall that we were at, and they would use it to buy a loose cigarette. So
Lucy's, yeah.
yeah, so it's that right there told me, one is like, oh, that, I really appreciate the ingenuity of the young person, knowing I was new and didn't really know what, a lot, wasn't too savvy at the time. um but also I was like, this is going to be a challenge, this is not going to be easy. And I knew that that young person with some direction could use that ingenuity, for good. And so I know that it's probably people are thinking like, oh, this is a lot that happened, but truly, like, that moment just showed me that I really want to work with these young people. I appreciate their savviness and their ingenuity and their smartness. While I'm somewhat misdirected, like, it really showed me that these are the young people that I should be working with.
And it's not easy because there's a lot of heartbreak that happens in the course of the years that we've worked.
Oh yeah.
We've seen, we probably both have, I would say, war stories, but stories of kids that you invested in and they take a wrong turn.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'm just, and I was, and I, when I met you, you were working for Central State Set, I think, right? That's the organization. I think I met
Right.
you,
Yep.
and I think from the get go, it was like we had the same kind of synergy, and we sat on a task force called the Family Task Force in Pilsen. And I will say this: it was a lot of hard work, but I think we did some pretty magical things. I'm not to blow smoke up our chimney, right? But there were some things that happened. Those few summers that we worked together in those intense moments where we were just trying to get something good to happen. I think that, I mean, that really to me also made, like trying to get a community out, to try to get people to come out and, and using basketball as the the driving, but giving people not just that, but food, because there's a lot of food issues in our communities. Just bringing people together, to working with the police, which can also be very difficult at times. Working with the community, because they're always apprehensive about people coming in and doing things. I really, those were some great times. We did 2 years in a row. We did a family unity night that I thought was just incredible. Those were incredible times. I thought those were just, I don't know, but just things that I think about as we work together.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about giving back and being of service. You mentioned those times during what was that, the family or the Pilsen Quality of Life Plan.
Yep,
That was a part of the work. It was under the umbrella that the work that we were doing, right?
yep, yep.
And that was, relatively early on in my community development, youth development career. We had met when I was working. I was doing my not-for-profit days, and as you said, we met to come together as a broad coalition of different stakeholders. We're talking about, other not-for-profits. You were working for a different not-for-profit than I. There was, law enforcement, so local CPD, elected officials, so on and so forth, right? And you and, like, for the most part, you brought like all these, people together in this group. And like I said, it was early on in my career. It was like 4 years doing youth development, violence prevention work. And so that was the first time I really saw, with my own eyes, just what collective, community activism and, community organizing, how much of an impact that can do beyond just the individuals, right? And so, as you said, part of our, the work was to put together every Friday night, every Friday evening, like a mini block party all throughout Pilsen. And how we played a role here in the violence prevention side is we identify like the blocks that had the high, that had the hottest, we're the hottest blocks, right? We're the highest gang
Hmm.
activity
Yep,
and,
yep.
street group activity. And we provide, we did a lot of, gang intervention work in Pilsen during that time. And so we were able to bring together groups peacefully. I got to say, I believe there was, within the blocks that we control, I don't think we ever had a single incident of violence. Um, and so, yeah, so just going back to what I was saying originally, just like seeing the coalition of folks come together to do these amazing events and truly bring peace to at least for those times that we were there, truly bring peace to those communities. We started with like a handful of people being at those block parties. By handful, I'm being,
One kid showing up.
optimistic.
One
Yeah,
kid
it was
showing up
one.
on Thursday.
We had one person show up. Yep, yep. But those family union nights that you talked about were kind of like our culminating events, I guess you could call them. I mean, hundreds of people, not an exaggeration, right? I think there was
Mhm.
close to 300, like that first night, second night, same
Yeah.
thing. Again, just seeing how building community actually works and giving back, and those are moments that I still treasure, honestly, like in my life. So, and the other part is that as part of this journey that we're talking about is I learned a lot of the things that I apply to this day, even at the mayor's office, is lessons I learned from you in that coalition building and community development. Um, that what we were doing is more defined now, which is like which is called safe space activations, and that's been a research and evidence based effective community safety strategy. And so we were really kind of doing things that you could even say we're on the cutting edge. And like I said, all that is principles and concepts that we're implementing citywide now at the mayor's office. So again, a lot of part of the journey, how I got here, and all that.
All right. I asked everyone this before we get into the movie, which we're going to talk about. What's the best part of your day?
So I mean, work is part of my day.
Yeah, in terms of the work that you're currently doing.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
because
yeah.
sometimes it feels like a far and few between, but I know that the work that you do is very meaningful. But what would be the best part of your day?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you asked me that because as I'm just talking about my experience and my background and how I got here, I try like to this day, I think those days I probably treasure them, the most. I think most fondly upon just working directly with community, being in community. And I say that to say that this role sometimes makes you feel, a little apart from community, as there's a lot less opportunity to do that. Even though I will say that in this current administration and especially under the leadership under the community safety office, we get a lot of opportunity to go out into community. But again, it's just not the same. Um, but I will say that the best part of my day is my mission has never changed, from the beginning when I started this work as a teacher to now in this position that I am with the mayor's office is to give back and to try to make people's lives better. And hopefully that folk with what I'm doing, people do not go through the same barriers that I did, right, to get
Mm.
to the positions, that I've been able to achieve. And so um, my favorite part of the day is when I see that our work has a positive impact on the people that we are trying to serve. And just to be more specific, whether that might be, hey, we found additional funding for a program that's going to serve more people, or we made a policy decision at the city that's going to make something easier for folks in our city, whether that's to get a job in our city if somebody has a criminal background, through the work of the reentry office, or if somebody gets the necessary support and resources and supportive services after they're a victim of gun violence. And so, though honestly, that happens almost every day. So those little mini wins are really what are the best, part of my day still.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, well, let's get into it now. The second half of our interview will be about Columbia Pictures, 1949, All the King's Men. It's a novel. That's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel written by Robert Penn Warren. Full disclosure, too, I read that in college because I studied creative writing and film, and that book did make an impact on me. But because I'm a visual person, the movie
Mhm.
really kind of captures me. It stars Broderick Crawford as Willie Stark. Willie
Mhm.
Stark is to say he's sort of like a hillbilly hick farmer who runs for office, loses, but then he's with the help of his wife. He studies the law, becomes a lawyer, and with this
Mhm.
idealistic view on like helping people. And then something tragic happens during the movie that kind of catapults him into politics, and he begins to, after so many defeats, he wins and gains the governorship.
Yep.
So the movie stars Broderick Crawford, John Ireland as Jack Burton, who narrates the story, Mercedes McCambridge, who is a part of Willie Stark's entourage, and it was directed, and John Derrick, who plays his adopted son. And it was directed by Robert Rossen, who also did the screenplay. So I just want to give a little bit of feedback, just a little
Sure.
context. I have not gotten to the point where I can put in video clips and pictures. So we're just talking about the film. We're having a conversation. It's very raw. But tell me what your thoughts on the film. And also, for a time, Greg and I and our friends would get together and we'd watch movies. But, my what I enjoy are black and white movies, and particularly film noir. But this movie really spoke to me, and I thought to myself as I was thinking about who to interview, and I thought of you. I thought, okay, here is a film about an idealistic. It's actually the character who narrates it, John Ireland. He
Mhm.
finds this thing about Willie Starks so enamoring, and I think Willie Starks starts off very sincere, but then is quickly corrupted by power. Right. So, what are your thoughts on the film? Go ahead. I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting choice, consider for our conversation. But I mean, as you're talking, as you were explaining the plot, obviously I'm thinking about, some of the different, um opinions and whatnot that we're developing as we're watching the film. I guess overall, I would say that for a film from 1949, I'm not watching a ton of films pre 19, I don't know, 75 or 4 or something like that. I think I would say like Alien 1, probably as far back as I go. Um, but yeah, and also, I was looking it up quickly. I didn't want to spoil too much of it, but I did see that it was the best picture for Oscar best picture for 1949. So very just, that piqued my interest. I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. It's about, politics, something that and government, obviously something I'm familiar with. And so, having watched it now, I was happily surprised by how engaged I was with a movie, black and white movie from long ago. That feels very, it does feel very dated, but not so much either, which we're probably good, which we are going to talk about here, right? But yeah, overall, I thought it was pretty. I thought it was very engaging. It was well acted. And there was, again, some of the parts that are a little outdated through being a little corny, but it was still, again, enjoyable. The end was good. Um, so yeah, overall, really liked it. The themes also, as I said, like outdated, but not really, because the themes are, a meteoric rise, to fame slash power, and then, catastrophic, decline and fall, because of hubris or whatnot. And so it's a story, it feels like as old as time itself. And so, just, again, watching this story, and then obviously so many of these stories happen and unfold, they're currently happening, just happened, or about to happen. That's always, again, an ever like a love story that'll never get old, it seems like. Corrupt politicians making backroom deals, with shady characters.
Justifying the backroom deals. Like we have, like, there's a line in the movie that stays with me when he's trying to convince people to support him. He goes, "You are good. I have to be in the realm of bad, or I have to, bad can come from good. Sometimes you have to be in bad for good to come out. It's almost like a justification of like these backroom deals, and this is the ends justify the means justify the ends. Is that how I say it? Is that how you say it? Or the ends justify the means, right? And I thought that was also very powerful. Yeah, it's just really quick. Nominated for 7 Academy Awards,
Okay.
won 3 for Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, no, Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Supporting Actress. So
Okay.
it got its accolades, not to mention some Golden Globe awards, but very powerful. I think very timely too. When I think about when I really put thought to like these movies, it's very timely because of the current atmosphere and things that we can. I know we're going to keep it very neutral because I want to make sure that we're not doing stepping into a realm that can get anybody in trouble. But very timely, I think. But it's very clear, so you put your faith in a particular leader, and then the leader betrays the movement because of their own greed. And what do you think about that? Do you think about that at all when you're working in the realm you're working in? It like, does that ever cross your mind? Man, is this person being sincere, or are they? Is it? Are they all? Do they all get swallowed up by power? Maybe not corrupt, but there's a power dynamic that happens when you're given power, and it does change you.
Yeah, I mean, again, like those, like I was talking about those themes, and they are, consistent throughout humankind. Once you touch that power, you get to a level of power or influence, that can be corrupting or can be, personality changing, is very real. And again, like, concept all this time itself. People handle fame, power, influence very differently, right? Again, that's something we get to see play out every single day, whether it's within our own little families or work structures, or just in social media, or popular culture, or what have you. So, um, I would say that, I mean, as I was watching the film, and as you asked, like, is this something that happened, that I've seen or experienced, or that, I mean, I think for me personally, right, I think I can speak to that. Again, coming from the direct service community, based organization, that's where I come from. I did that for 7.5 years, and coming to a very, administrative role, right, is and working in a space like, a mayor's office, or county government as well, right, is that one of the things, again, for me personally, is that it did kind of shape my worldview a little bit differently, in that, and by that I mean, I had very, I think, strict views. And I think that just happens with, like, as young people mature, right, as to older
Mm,
folks. It's one of the things, right? When I was doing this work, I was very young. Now I'm, post 40, more experience, you're more seasoned, you think you want things to go slower, right? You want things to be more stable. And so this definitely caution everybody, this comes from older perspective. But I had some more, I think, uncompromising views. And so there's a lot more compromise that you have to make as you get older, and as you get into these positions that you might not have done when you were younger. And so for me, is that, I'm not saying I got corrupted by any means, but, or some
no,
people
no,
would say that.
no.
No, I'm saying some
Yeah.
people would say that, right? But because this was, again, just has to do, mostly with age, and also with the fact that, again, in these positions, where you're a public servant, is you have to try to do the best for, all, and not just for some, right? And so
Mhm.
in that, there's an inherent conflict between, these very, fiery ideals that you come in, coming from community and from your own background, to, I have a broader responsibility to more people. Not to say that you still don't care about the folks that got you there. You're not answering, or that you don't answer to those folks still, but, again, you have to have a broader perspective. And so for me, again, personally, um, this, in these positions, again, like, it does make it did shift my position a little bit, just in terms of, um, I need to be, my perspective has to be broader than what I initially started.
I mean, I think particularly because within a bureaucracy of government, there's so many moving parts, and there has to be some kind of compromise. As long as you don't compromise your soul, I guess is the question. let me. Do you think Willie Stark is the main character, or is it Jack Burton? Who do you think within the movie, the guy that follows him and narrates the story, or is it Willie Stark? Because I've always, that's one thing. As I was rewatching the film, I thought, this is really Jack's story. This is Jack, who was sort of a lost kind of guy who came from money but didn't want to live off of his parents' money,
Right.
and did this, did that, and then found reporting, had some skill in writing, and then happened upon Willie Stark as a kid, wrote something about him that uplifted him, and then sort of kind of became like, wow, this guy has something, and I want to follow him. He's sort of a kind of wandering character who needed to latch onto something. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question too, because I thought when you were asking the question about, well, did this, did the power corrupt this man? I feel like Jack, right, the reporter guy, he got more corrupted than Willie, and I'll say that to say when I say that to say is that I think even at towards the end, the brother, the doctor, the head doctor of the
Mm,
hospital that Willie built, he tells him, "Oh, you've been corrupt this whole time. That's how you started." And I think that was like a kind of a throwaway line, but also just like a Easter egg to say Willie has been corrupt from day one. It almost seemed like,
yeah,
because as soon as he got a little taste of the power, that scene where he's like collecting the checks was a cool scene. Like
yeah,
when he's
yeah.
receiving different checks from different companies, and I love that little montage. That was very early on. Like as soon as he got like into these elections, and so I think to me, Willie was always was going to be corrupt. He really craved that power. I mean, he was cutting out newspaper articles of himself and putting
Of
them in a
himself.
freaking in a scrapbook. Like I don't know, maybe you've done that, Lewis, but I certainly have. I certainly have it. I mean, and so I'm just joking, but yeah. So anyway, to me, that he was always corrupt. What I think again, what you're saying is, and ask me who the main character is. I think it's Jack, because he really had, I think, more growth as a character. Because again, Willie was corrupt from the moment he showed up to the day he died, when he died. Right? We can get to that, like what he said at the end, but I think it was more interesting as Jack is he had more development as a character. Where he started off as, like you said, a lost kind of person, like a little bit of a rebel. He threw that drink at the judge at the beginning, like to show,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
hey,
That's
I'm
a
bucking
stepdad. That was
against
a
the drink,
stepdad. Yeah.
or stepdad, sorry. And then, he kind of went through like an alcoholic phase there, it looked like, as well. Another cool montage where he was just kind of drinking in random places at unemployment lines, again, nice touch. And then he gets back with a job with Willie, kind of, falls in love and falls like under this cloak of power and influence that he seems to like change as a person. And then, eventually kind of like, I think at the end, finally figuring out like, we got to tell people this guy, was a real monster and was only in it for himself. So I would say, yes, I think Jack was the main character, and Willie was more the, the piece that the movie used to show Jack's growth.
And I think I think what you're alluding to is like, yeah, here's this corrupt individual, but the people around him kept turning a blind eye and making excuses, and kind of justifying this behavior for the greater good. And that, I think, is what, I could be wrong, that children is even more corrupt. It's like, oh, I'm only following, I'm only doing it, I'm allowing this person to do this. I know it's wrong, but it's for a greater good, because he built roads, he built bridges, he built hospitals, he slapped his name on everything, which sounds kind of familiar. But uh, you know, uh, they were not these selfless projects; they were montages to his achievements, and it was very clear that you could see that happening. And I thought the person I felt sorry for the most was his wife, Lucy.
Hmm.
Because she was there through thick and thin. And the second he's out the door and he's gallivanting, as they say,
Yeah.
with other women. I felt that. What do you think? Would you? So, would you recommend this film to family and friends? Would this be on the movie night? Like, so we want to do something to someone new? Is this something you would pull out of the hat and say, hey, you know what? Let's watch this film.
So,
Be honest. No,
yeah.
be honest.
No, yeah, I'll be honest. No, I mean, would I recommend it for sure? I would tell people like, hey, if you're into this kind of movie, like, absolutely, you should watch it. I don't know if there's a lot of people I know who would watch this movie. You know what I'm saying? But no, I definitely would recommend this movie. Like I said from the very beginning, I was so surprised at how engaged I was. I ended up having to finish it in two settings because I ended up falling asleep when the first time I was trying to watch it. But I immediately woke up and I wanted to I woke up and I was like, oh, I need to know what happened. So like that's when I knew I was like, okay, I'm hooked. So yeah, I would recommend it for sure.
Cool. And any last thoughts on the film? Because I also want to give you some space to promote anything that your organization is doing. Well, actually, why don't we do this? Let's what is there anything you want to promote that's happening in the city right now that you want to promote to our like 5 viewers? This is a very niche thing I'm doing. So if I got 33 views. I was over the moon. 33 views. So we'll see if I get any more. But anything you that you want to promote?
I guess, with the opportunity, yeah. I mean, working at the mayor's office, we, are able to promote and have a platform to talk about a lot of different support services for folks. So, if anybody's looking for any community supports, supportive services around victim services, community violence interruption, gender-based violence, a lot of different resources under the umbrella that is community safety. I would tell folks to visit our website at chicago.gov/community safety. And that's where you could get links to a lot of the different resources that I just talked about.
All right. Any final thoughts on the film?
Um, yeah, no, again, I was very surprised how much I liked it. I, touched it briefly on it before, but there were so many, like so many themes that are applicable to what our current economic and political climate is in America right now. Um, the way that utilizing a political base for your own means, your own personal gain, turning on those same people, those principles that kind of got you to where you're at. Corrupt, power does, corrupt a lot of folks. And it's not just the people at the top. I think that's what we talked about, and that's what I talked about is the circle of people around, Willie all got corrupted by that, bubble of corruption that came from Willie. And I don't know, you said people turn a blind eye for the greater good. I think they were just corrupt, as well. And they were just drunk under that influence of Willie, right? And so, people do a lot of immoral things because, there is that cult of personality, that is also very prevalent, I think, in our society these days.
That's a thing we need to touch up on. But yeah, the idea of a cult of personality, like that's what really had, right? Because he could speak at the level of the common person and make them feel like they mattered. I think that's a very dangerous, that's a double-edged sword. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. Populist politics, which is again another theme that is prevalent throughout the movie. That 70 years later, 80 years later, still very very applicable. Towards the end there, when there was even towards the end of the movie when Willie was trying to hold on to power, and there was a radio broadcast that he was going to use state police to keep power, to so yeah. So that again, a lot of interesting themes that are being talked about here in 2026.
One last thing, because we can give away that, but I found also fascinating when he's shot and assassinated. He can't even understand why anyone would have shot him. He's so blinded, even on the brink of, there's no reflection whatsoever. Why did he shoot me? I mean, why would you do that to me? You know what I mean? I also thought it was very not subtle, but I mean, it was there, but I thought it was very powerful. Like even at to the point of like death, he just doesn't get why anybody would be so angry at him to do that. I don't know. That kind of stuck in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, that again, the power had corrupted him so much that he couldn't even think clearly anymore, right? Like about why
Oh,
anybody wouldn't like him or anything. So, yeah, good point.
well, Greg, Gregorio, Greg, I know it's Greg. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. You know, if you like this, please hit that like button, subscribe. I'm going to try to do these at least every other week or once a week. I'm going to try to get. So this is the third podcast in the can. I'm hoping to refine this and get better. I will have you back soon because the first one we were going to talk about was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I'm glad we did all the Kingsmen because I
Yeah.
think it was so appropriate for the time and we're doing. But I think we will revisit this. And I want to thank you for all the great work that you do, man. I mean,
Thank you.
and I'm sure your parents and your family are proud of everything that you've accomplished and the things that you will accomplish, which will probably be, big things. Thanks for being on my podcast, man. All right, we're out.
Thank you, Lewis. Bye. Bye.
Take it easy, buddy.